After the fire broke out, my entire body was being severely scorched by the flames. There seemed to be no other sensation except for the excruciating pain. All I could faintly hear in my ears was my own weakening breath. Suddenly, a man's voice rang out, "Mr. James, let's make a bet. Let's bet on who Sophia will save first when she comes. I bet she'll save me first." I tried hard to look in the direction of the voice and saw David, who was squatting at the outermost position, looking at me with excitement all over his face. David was Sophia's newly recruited assistant and also the one who caused this fire. I thought he was really crazy. Unfortunately, my whole body hurt so much that I couldn't react in any way and could only maintain the same position. Suddenly, the rapid sound of footsteps came from outside the door, followed by Sophia's anxious voice, "Don't be afraid, I'm coming to save you right away." I tried my best to raise my head and watched Sophia run in. Just as I was about to warn her of the danger here, I saw her bypass me directly and run towards David not far away. She desperately helped David up and left without even looking at me. I saw David casting a triumphant look down at me as he passed by. It hurt so much. I really wanted to make a sound, but I didn't even have the strength to open my mouth. There was only endless despair. My consciousness gradually faded, and bits and pieces of memories with Sophia flashed through my mind. David was Sophia's first love. Whenever he showed up, she could never see me. All these years, I had been following Sophia, trying hard to make her fall in love with me. But this time, I was really tired. I slowly closed my eyes and lost consciousness. When I regained consciousness again, before opening my eyes, I could smell the pungent disinfectant smell of the hospital. "Will he wake up?" It was Sophia's voice. "It's hard to say. It depends on the patient's own will to survive," the doctor replied. Sophia walked to my bedside. When she saw that I had slowly opened my eyes, she was a bit surprised and quickly walked to my side, grabbing my hand and shouting excitedly, "James, you're finally awake." I looked at her acting like this and thought of what happened in the operating room after I was rescued. At that time, I woke up and saw the doctor urgently looking for the family member to sign the surgical agreement, but Sophia was nowhere to be found. Later, a nurse rushed over and said, the patient's family member went to take care of another fire victim, but that person didn't have a single injury. These three people are really strange. I knew that Sophia had gone to find David. But she was so heartless that she left her husband, whose life was hanging in the balance, and ran to take care of the uninjured assistant. So when I woke up and saw Sophia being so hypocritical, I just felt disgusted. Sophia saw me like this and looked at me worriedly, saying, "James, what's wrong?" "It's me, Sophia." I shook off her hand, but because of the large movement, my whole body hurt severely. I suddenly threw off the quilt, endured the pain, and limped to the bathroom. When I saw myself in the mirror, I collapsed and fell to the ground. In the mirror, my body was covered with dense scars of different depths, and there were even some on my face. These scars were shocking and extremely ugly. Sophia quickly ran to my side to help me up and comforted me, saying, "James, with the advanced technology these days, your scars can all be removed. What you need to do now is to take good care of your body." The doctor, who knew I had woken up, also rushed over and gave me a full body check. Then he said, "Mr. James is recovering well. He has passed the critical period. However, he has large area burns all over his body. These scars were caused by staying too long at the fire site. It would have been better if he had been sent here earlier." When I heard the doctor's words, I suddenly looked at Sophia. If it weren't for Sophia's obsession with David, I wouldn't have. Sophia saw my knife-like eyes and said somewhat guiltily, "James, are you hungry? What do you want to eat? I'll ask the aunt to make some and send it over." I ignored Sophia and took out my phone to call my lawyer, asking him to draw up a divorce agreement for me. After this incident, I had completely woken up. A person like Sophia wasn't worth my devotion. Sophia heard what I said and immediately shouted, "You want to divorce me? James, I know you're suffering like this, and I'm suffering too, but I really didn't see you at that time. You can't blame me." I didn't know how Sophia could have the nerve to say such a thing. At that time, David went out to work with me. Sophia knew that David and I must be together, and I was right by the door, while David was standing at the innermost part. But Sophia didn't even think about coming to save me. If it weren't for the firefighters who rescued me in time later, I would have been dead by now. I closed my eyes in pain and said, "Sophia, I'm really tired. I beg you to let me go and divorce me." Sophia still thought I was just being angry and said in a gentle voice, "James, I know you're still angry, but don't joke about divorce, okay?" I hated Sophia's look as if she thought I could never leave her. I raised my hand and threw the cup she handed me to the ground. "Sophia, when I say we're getting divorced, can't you understand?" This voice was a bit loud, and soon my door was pushed open. I saw David walking in wearing a hospital gown. When he saw that I was awake, he put on a happy expression. "Mr. James, you're finally awake." But when he saw the broken cup, he became worried again. "Mr. James, why are you arguing with Sophia as soon as you wake up? Although Sophia has been taking care of me these days, she has you in her heart." When I heard David's words, I laughed coldly a couple of times. Although David was wearing a hospital gown, his face was ruddy, and he was unharmed from head to toe and in good spirits. And Sophia left me in the operating room for such an uninjured person and even ignored me afterwards. I looked at David coldly and unceremoniously exposed him. "David, you set the fire." At that time, I was already off work and ready to go home. "It was you who said that the partner had made a last-minute appointment for a factory inspection, so I went to that place with you. But when we got to the factory, there was no one there. Just as I was about to leave, you took out the explosives." When David heard my words, the expression on his face was a bit aggrieved. He hid behind Sophia and said in a low voice, "Mr. James, what do you mean? No one wanted this to happen. You can't frame me just because Sophia saved me." "Sophia protected David. Are you crazy, James? If it weren't for David protecting you when the fire broke out, you would have died long ago. How could you have waited until the firefighters came to save you? And it was he who told the firefighters that you were alive. Now you're biting the hand that feeds you." Now, listening to their words of covering for each other, I just felt extremely disgusted. Moreover, Sophia was such a fool that she actually believed David's illogical words. I retorted unceremoniously, "David protected me, yet he's unharmed while I'm seriously injured and unconscious? If he really wanted to save me, he would have told the firefighters before going out, not after you came in." Sophia defended David. With such a big incident, David must have been stunned at that time. David stuck his head out and looked at me like a poor little rabbit. "Mr. James, I know you've always disliked me, but Sophia and I are really just friends. If you hate me, I can leave her." After saying that, David was about to leave, but Sophia grabbed him. Sophia glared at me, stood up for David, and said angrily, "That's enough, James. Ever since David came back, you've been targeting him everywhere. We were the ones who were sorry for him back then." When I heard Sophia mention the things back then, I became even more angry, but I didn't have the strength to argue with Sophia anymore. I tried my best to calm down and said, "Sophia, my lawyer will talk to you about the divorce. Take David and leave." Sophia said angrily, "We've been married for 7 years. Do you really have to make it like this?" I closed my eyes and said in pain, "It's because of you that we've come to this." Over the years, I made countless concessions to Sophia. I gave her whatever she wanted. Since David came back, I pretended not to know that they secretly met in private and even agreed to Sophia's request to let him be her assistant in the company. I asked myself that I had a clear conscience towards Sophia, but she regarded my life as nothing. David didn't need to get involved in the first place, but he insisted on doing so. "Mr. James, please don't divorce Sophia because of me. Sophia and I are just friends. There's really nothing between us. You have to believe Sophia." I really couldn't stand David's hypocritical appearance and directly scolded, "David, don't you feel disgusted when you say this?" When Sophia saw me like this, she was like a bristling hedgehog. She suddenly threw the teacup on the table to the ground and said angrily, "Fine, James. You want a divorce, right? Then let's get divorced. Do you really think I can't live without you?" After saying that, she pulled David and left. The two of them had just made me have a headache. After they left, I lay on the bed to rest. I don't know how long it had passed. When I woke up again, it was already dark outside. I turned on my phone to check the time and happened to see a message from a friend, which was a screenshot of David's moments. The picture showed two people walking on the beach, their fingers intertwined. Although their faces were not shown, I could recognize at a glance that the ring on the woman's hand was the unique one that I had searched many places to customize for Sophia. David's caption was, "After going through so much, fortunately, you're still by my side. No one can stop us from now on." I closed my phone and just thought it was extremely funny. How dare David say such a thing? He left Sophia back then only because the things he did were discovered by us. Sophia's parents and I were afraid that Sophia would be sad if she knew, so we gave him a sum of money to let him go abroad. David wasn't forced to separate from Sophia. He was trying to climb the social ladder and ran away after being discovered. But Sophia was willing to let me die in the fire for such a person. I turned my head to look at the bright moon outside the window. It was really time for me and Sophia to end things. My parents hired the best doctor for me for subsequent rehabilitation treatment. After about a month, I could leave the hospital and go home to recuperate. Although the scars on my body might not be able to disappear completely, fortunately, the scars on my face were almost invisible. As soon as I got home after being discharged from the hospital, I smelled the fragrance coming from the kitchen. Although Sophia didn't come out, her voice came over. David, are you back? Wash your hands and come eat. I made a lot of your favorite dishes today. When I heard Sophia mention David's name, my eyes turned cold. This was the that Sophia and I shared, but Sophia actually brought David back while I was in the hospital. Just thinking that David was staying in my house, using my tableware, and sleeping in my bed made me feel sick. David? When Sophia didn't get a response, she came out of the kitchen. She was slightly stunned when she saw me, as if she didn't react. I remembered Sophia saying that she couldn't stand the smell of cooking oil in the kitchen the most, so I had never let Sophia cook a meal in the kitchen. Even when I had a fever of 40 degrees, I was reluctant to let Sophia cook porridge for me. But now, Sophia was cooking for David. Sophia reacted and a hint of embarrassment flashed across her face. She scratched her head and said, James, you were discharged from the hospital today? I looked at her and sneered at the corner of my mouth, saying, my parents should have told you that I was discharged from the hospital today, right? Oh, what did you say to my parents? You couldn't get away from the company meeting today. I looked her up and down and continued, is this what you call a company meeting? Sophia was in the wrong and didn't know how to refute me, but still tried to save face. I really did go to the company meeting. I just came back and thought about making some soup for you to nourish your body. I am Ed without exposing her and walked to the dining table and sat down. Sophia quickly grabbed her phone and rushed into the kitchen. I guessed she was sending a message to David, telling him not to come back now, but I didn't expose her. Sophia soon came out of the kitchen with the food. I glanced at the mutton soup in the middle, with coriander sprinkled on it. Sophia took a bowl and served me a bowl of mutton soup flatteringly, putting it in front of me. The smell of mutton and the unpleasant smell of coriander made my stomach feel so uncomfortable that I wanted to vomit. I had a serious stomach problem, which was left over from the crazy socializing when Sophia and I founded the company. Moreover, I was allergic to mutton and hated coriander. Sophia knew all these things. But now, all she could think about was David and she couldn't think of me at all. I pushed the bowl in front of Sophia and coldly reminded her, Sophia, I'm allergic to mutton and can't eat coriander. Sophia remembered and quickly apologized, sorry, James. I've been so busy with so many things recently that I forgot. I didn't give her face and said straightforwardly, I don't think so. I remember David's favorite is mutton soup, right? After being exposed by me, Sophia shouted at me angrily, haven't you made enough trouble? I gave you a month to calm down. You should have calmed down by now, right? I'll pretend I never heard about the divorce. Don't mention it again in the future. So Sophia hadn't come to look for me in the past month because she thought I was throwing a tantrum and wanted me to calm down. She thought I would be as easy to coax as before. As long as she beckoned, I would run to her. But she was probably going to be disappointed. I took out the divorce agreement from my bag and handed it over, saying calmly, sign it, and we'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau at a certain time. Sophia seemed to have never expected that I would really take out the divorce agreement. She widened her eyes and said, are you serious? I nodded and replied, our assets will be divided equally. The rest, my lawyer will talk to you in detail. Sophia gritted her teeth and said, fine, James. Don't regret it after we get divorced. The corner of my mouth twitched. I wouldn't regret divorcing Sophia. The thing I regretted the most was marrying Sophia. I recuperated at home for another week. During this week, I could see David's moments every day. Perhaps he knew that I could see his moments, so he posted like crazy. The latest one was a photo of them on vacation in the Maldives. In the photo, they were hugging tightly, like a loving couple. When I saw the photo, my face darkened. When Sophia and I got married, the company was in crisis. We just got the marriage certificate in a hurry. We didn't even hold a wedding, let alone a honeymoon. Later, although the company got through the crisis, we became busier and had no time for a vacation. After the company stabilized, I proposed to take Sophia to the Maldives to make up for the honeymoon and wedding, but she always prevaricated and refused me. I always thought she didn't like traveling, but now I realized that she just didn't like traveling with me. I thought I had no feelings for Sophia anymore, but when I saw these photos, I was still sad. Sad that my years of devotion had ended up in betrayal. I closed my phone and received a message from a friend, saying that something had happened to the company recently and asking me to come back quickly after I recovered. I originally planned to wait until my body was fully recovered before dealing with the company's affairs, but since my friend said so, I quickly packed up and went to the company. When I arrived at the company, the receptionist was a bit surprised to see me and then quickly ran to my side. Mr. James, you're discharged from the hospital. How is your recovery? Miss Sophia went out for a meeting today and is not in the company now. I looked at the receptionist hesitantly. What did it matter to me whether Sophia was in the company or not? Seeing her stop me like this, I believed the rumors even more. I ignored the receptionist and swiped my card to enter the company directly. I went straight to my office. When I entered the office, I found that the decoration of my office had all changed. I didn't like a fancy office, so I kept everything simple. But now, all the furniture in the office was expensive and luxurious, and the taste of the person was very vulgar. I walked to the desk and saw that my name behind the vice president's nameplate was gone, and a familiar name followed. A sarcastic smile appeared on my face. Some people really got carried away when they had a little power. The nameplate on the desk had changed from mine to David's. The company I founded was made vice president by someone else without my knowledge. I knew it was all done by Sophia. Back then, when Sophia wanted to start a business, I borrowed money from my family and accompanied her. The early days of starting the business were incredibly tough. I went out for business dinners every day, and I even ended up in the hospital with gastric bleeding from excessive drinking. I still remember that day when she held my hand and tearfully said she wanted to marry me. Later, as the company gradually stabilized, my prestige in the company was higher than hers. The senior management was loyal to me, but they were skeptical about Sophia's abilities. Sophia cried, saying she felt wronged, so I overruled all objections and made her the president of the company while I stepped back to become the vice president. But now, Sophia actually used her power for personal gain and made David, who knows nothing, the vice president. Just as I was about to call Sophia, two familiar voices came from outside. "Sophia, do you think James will be angry if he finds out?" It was David's voice. "Why do you care if he's angry? I'm the person in charge of the company. If he makes me angry, he should get out." Sophia replied immediately. "Sophia, you're so kind. I'm glad you're willing to forgive me this time I'm back." David's voice carried a hint of grievance. "It wasn't your fault before. If it weren't for James and my parents forcing you to leave, we wouldn't have been separated for so long." Sophia consoled him. Right after she finished speaking, an ear-piercing sound came from outside the door. My fists gradually clenched, and my heart ached as if it were bleeding. Soon, the door was pushed open. "Sophia, I feel this office is a bit small. Change it to a bigger one for me another day." David stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. I raised my hand and greeted them. When Sophia saw me, her expression was a bit unnatural, but she quickly regained her composure and looked down at me haughtily, saying, "This is no longer your office. David is the vice president of the company now." I picked up the nameplate and threw it into the trash can. Then I looked up at the somewhat angry Sophia and asked, "Did the other senior management in the company agree? Or is it just you?" Sophia glared at me. "I'm the president of the company. Can't I even arrange a vice president?" I just smiled when I heard her words and then continued. "Company president? Sophia, don't forget that the company was founded with the investment from my family. Even now, I hold the highest share and have the most real power. I gave you the position of company president back then, and I can take it away at any time. Or let me put it another way. If I leave the company and ask the G Group to withdraw their investment, how long do you think the company can last under your and David's leadership?" When Sophia heard my words, she immediately fell silent. Although the company was getting better and better now, it had little to do with Sophia. Many of the senior management didn't recognize Sophia either. Seeing that Sophia didn't dare to speak, David carefully stuck his head out and pretended to be wronged as before, saying, "Sophia, if Mr. James really minds, forget it. Don't quarrel with Mr. James because of me." His male green tea act immediately aroused Sophia's protective instincts. She pointed at me and cursed, "James, don't go too far. I also contributed to this company. It's not yours alone." When I heard what Sophia said, I just found it really funny. She looked so wronged as if I had said something wrong. I looked at her calmly and asked, "Really? Then, when I was hospitalized with gastric bleeding from drinking for a cooperation, what were you doing? You were having a manicure with someone else. You only cried a couple of times after I came out of the operating room. When I was traveling all over the country to visit countless factories for the company's resources, what were you doing? You were shopping with your girlfriends and even asked me for money to buy that limited edition item." I asked word by word, "Do I need to remind you of all these things one by one?" Naturally, Sophia didn't dare to confront me. As a top-notch graduate from the finance department, she surely had her contributions to the company, but they were far less than mine. So it was simply impossible for her to push me aside and monopolize the company. When Sophia heard me bringing up the past, she asked warily, "What do you want to do?" I said calmly, of course, I want to take back everything that belongs to me. Sophia walked up to me and raised her hand, trying to slap me, but I stopped her. I forcefully shook her off, making her stagger back several steps. She rubbed her red twisted wrist and looked at me fiercely, saying, "James, you'll regret treating me like this." The next day, I was woken up by my secretary's call. As soon as I answered, I heard the urgent voice on the other end, "Mr. James, someone reported that you leaked company secrets. Now the company is in chaos. Come quickly." I got myself ready and went out. As soon as I arrived at the company's conference room, I saw the senior management gathered there. In the conference room, the shareholders and senior management were already seated. When they saw me, they immediately greeted me and asked about my recent situation. After the greetings, they started asking me whether those reports were true or not. I didn't answer their questions. Instead, I walked directly to the president's seat and sat down. When Sophia saw me do this, she wanted to say something but didn't dare. She could only walk to the vice president's seat angrily. And David had to sit in the assistant's seat at the back. Regarding the accusation that I leaked company secrets to a rival company, I had evidence to prove my innocence. After saying that, I took out the new product concept of the rival company and two of my project concepts from different periods. One was saved a week ago, and the other was saved 5 days ago, both of which were earlier than the new product concept of the rival company. The new product concept of the rival company was exactly the same as the one I saved a week ago. This could prove that I definitely didn't leak this confidential document. Otherwise, I would only have leaked the latest one. The rival company, in order to target us, got the blueprint and accelerated their research. But my blueprint had an important flaw, which had been fixed in my latest blueprint. So I was framed. Of course, this proof wasn't that straightforward. I had something more direct. After saying that, I turned on the computer and clicked on the video on the desktop. It was a surveillance video. When Sophia saw that the screen showed my bedroom, she panicked immediately. Suddenly, David's figure appeared in the surveillance video. He sneaked up to the desk in my bedroom and rummaged around, not knowing what he was looking for. But soon he took out a document, put it in his bag triumphantly, and then tiptoed away. I installed this camera after I was discharged from the hospital because I was afraid that David would be brought back by Sophia without my knowledge. I didn't expect it to serve this purpose. I looked at the flustered David and asked, "David, you broke into my house and stole company confidential documents. What else do you have to say?" When David heard my words, he was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. He turned to Sophia and pleaded, "Sophia." Sophia immediately interrupted David, "David, how could you do such a thing?" I sat in the chair, watching them turn on each other, and found it really interesting. When David heard Sophia's words, he widened his eyes in surprise and said, "Sophia, you're actually trying to distance yourself from this?" I looked at Sophia thoughtfully and asked, "Sophia, did you really not know about this?" Just as Sophia was about to defend herself, my secretary knocked on the door and came in. He said to me respectfully, "Mr. James, the press conference is ready. The media friends have arrived. You and the other directors can go down now." Sophia reacted and stared at me, asking in confusion, "Why are you holding a press conference at this time?" I stood up and walked towards the door, replying calmly, "Of course, to remove someone from their position." Sophia followed me and asked nervously, "Whose position? Do you dare to remove mine?" I didn't answer her and walked straight out. Everyone followed and came to the press conference venue. The media sensed that something was wrong between me and Sophia and immediately pointed their cameras at us sensitively. I waved my hand and said in a flat tone, "Today, we're holding this press conference to clarify some facts. First, Ms. Sophia abused her power. During my hospitalization, she made her assistant, David, the vice president to replace me. Second, this assistant, David, was the mastermind behind the fire incident. He asked me to go to the factory for an inspection after work, led me to the factory, and then ignited the explosive. In the end, I was seriously injured and almost died, while he remained unharmed. Finally, the two of them colluded to steal the company's confidential documents and then framed me. Therefore, today, based on the highest shareholding, the company needs to re-elect the main person in charge." After everyone heard what I said, they were shocked and started whispering. Sophia noticed the second point I mentioned. She slapped the table hard and asked angrily, "James, what the hell are you talking about? You said David is the mastermind. Do you have evidence?" "I haven't reported this to the police these days because I've been collecting evidence. And now, I've collected all the evidence. Besides, I have a gift for Sophia." I looked at Sophia, who was protecting David everywhere, and said calmly, "I've already handed all the evidence to the police. I believe the police will find out the truth. When David heard my words, his face changed. He immediately became vigilant and said, "How could you have evidence?" His words were like an admission of guilt, but Sophia didn't notice. "You'd better not fabricate evidence. Be careful of retribution." In fact, they didn't know that as soon as I woke up, I immediately hired a private detective to investigate that factory. But as I expected, all the surveillance cameras were removed at that time, and there was no evidence to prove that David was the one who did it. Fortunately, every time I went to the factory, I would bring a small camera, and that day was no exception. When the fire broke out, I happened to put the camera in my pocket. Although the fire damaged the camera a bit, it was repaired, and the recording inside didn't disappear. I turned on the computer and clicked the play button. This was the first gift I prepared for Sophia, a repaired video. At the beginning of the video, the factory was empty. "David, didn't you say there was a factory inspection today? Where are they?" My voice came out. "Mr. James is so smart. Can't you tell that there's no factory inspection today?" David's voice sounded. My camera turned towards David's face when it heard his words. His face, which usually looked harmless, now had a conspiratorial smile, looking malicious. I asked in confusion, "What do you mean?" Hatred appeared on David's face again, and he shouted angrily, "James, if it weren't for you ruining my plans back then, I would have married Sophia long ago. There would be no place for you. And I wouldn't be almost 30 and still have no money." At that time, I didn't know what was going to happen next. I just felt angry and asked indignantly, "Weren't those things all your own fault? I'm already being lenient by not exposing you now." After hearing this, David said arrogantly, "You don't need to expose me because you'll soon be a dead man." Ha ha. I sensed something and asked doubtfully, "You?" Bang. I only said one word when I was drowned out by the sound of the fire. The video stopped here, but the truth was already clear, and there was no need for further explanation. Sophia stared at the screen with wide eyes, and she didn't come out of her shock for a long time. David reacted quickly and immediately pretended to be angry as if he was being framed, saying, "James, did you spend this month creating this AI synthesized thing to frame me?" Sophia glanced at David but didn't say anything. She was also confused about the situation now. Seeing that Sophia didn't defend him, David quickly grabbed her hand and said pitifully, "Sophia, you must believe me. How could I do something like murder? You know I'm even afraid to kill a bug. James must be deliberately framing me. He's just jealous that we got back together and wants to frame me." I clapped my hands, praising David's words, "Afraid to kill a bug? Wow, David, you're so kind. Then, wasn't it you who hired a group of thugs to rape Sophia back then?" When Sophia heard my words, she was like being struck by lightning. She took a half step back, sat down on the chair as if her legs had gone weak, and forced herself to look at me, asking in surprise, "James, do you have evidence to prove it? If not, I'll sue you for slander." When David heard Sophia speaking for him, he looked at me triumphantly, "Yeah, James, do you have evidence? You'd better not spread rumors in front of the media friends." All the media friends were excited, waiting for me to produce evidence. I looked at David's smug face, smiled confidently, and then pressed a button on the computer. The next moment, the screen turned black, and then a conversation between a strange man and David came out. "Mr. David, are you sure this is okay? Will Sophia really believe it? What could go wrong? You just go through with it until the last step. Then I'll come in and play the hero to save the beauty. Won't she be grateful to me and be devoted to me for the rest of her life? Mr. David, what about the money? Don't worry. You won't be short-changed." When David heard this recording, his face turned pale with fright. He never expected that this recording from back then was saved, nor did he expect to be stabbed in the back. The media all looked like they had finally got a big scoop and quickly pointed their cameras at Sophia and David. Sophia pushed through the media, rushed to David, and slapped him hard. She was trembling all over and cried, "David, did you really do those things back then?" David grabbed Sophia's hand and replied pitifully, "It wasn't me. This was all synthesized by James. He's using it to frame me. Sophia, you have to believe me. You really have to believe me." But with the evidence in front of her, no matter how much David tried to defend himself, Sophia no longer believed him. Sophia stared at David with a fierce look, "David, you deserve to die." After saying that, Sophia picked up the scissors in the conference room and tried to stab David in the abdomen. But David reacted quickly and dodged. Just as this farce was about to end, the police came and arrested David on the charge of attempted murder. I spent the next week dealing with company affairs and didn't see Sophia. I heard that the police had found the most direct evidence of David igniting the fire, and the trial would start soon. I refused to mediate, and Sophia, the victim of the rape case back then, also refused to mediate. But David kept insisting on his innocence, so the case was delayed. One day, as I was about to go to work, I saw Sophia waiting for me in the downstairs garden. I originally didn't want to pay attention to her, but Sophia stopped me and made quite a commotion. I had no choice but to take her home. Sophia saw that there was no expression on my face. Her eyes turned red, and her voice trembled as she asked, "James, I know how terribly wrong I was. Can't you forgive me?" I sat on the chair, unmoved by Sophia's appearance, and just asked, "Sophia, when you had an affair during our marriage, indulged David to target me, and instructed him to steal documents and frame me, did you think of me?" When Sophia heard me listing her crimes, she collapsed and knelt down on the ground, grabbing my hand and pleading bitterly, "I'm sorry, James. I was bewitched by David. I know I was wrong. We've been in a relationship for more than 10 years. Please forgive me. I'll never do this again." Seeing her pleading so desperately for my forgiveness, I didn't feel much relief. I just felt sorry for myself. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and slowly said, "Sophia, now I just feel that all my efforts in the past 10 years were wasted. No, a dog raised for more than 10 years would know how to be grateful to me, but you stabbed me in the back everywhere. You're even worse than a dog." Sophia didn't get angry when I scolded her. Instead, she agreed, yes, I'm even worse than a dog. You can hit me or scold me, as long as you forgive me and we can get back together." I looked at her like this and smiled helplessly. When I first saw her in the high school class, I fell in love with her at first sight. At that time, Sophia was proud, beautiful, and extremely kind. She helped other classmates and often rescued the stray cats and dogs at school. But when did Sophia become such a person, full of ill intentions and selfish? I shook my head and replied, "It's impossible, Sophia. We'll never be together again in this life." Sophia saw that I was so heartless and shouted, "James, do you really need to be so heartless?" I didn't answer her. I just dragged her and pushed her out of my house. Sophia said I was heartless, but my heartlessness was not even half of hers. She did so many things to hurt me, and I just retaliated one by one. After Sophia and David were fired from the company, I overhauled the company from top to bottom. Now the company is even better than before. After the rival company's defective product was boycotted by the public, our company almost became the leader. I heard news about David and Sophia again half a year later. It was said that during David's retrial, when no one was paying attention, Sophia took out a knife she had prepared long ago and stabbed it fiercely into David's heart. Just like what happened in the meeting room back then, she was even more decisive and resolute this time. David was stabbed in the heart. He didn't even wait for the doctor to arrive before he stopped breathing, and his eyes remained open until his death. When Sophia saw David's body, she was still laughing even as the police arrested her. She said in a crazy manner, "Ha, David, you've deceived me for 10 years. You're not even human. You deserve to die. I've finally killed you. Ha, James, do you see? I've killed this scoundrel who hurt you. Can you forgive me now? Ha, it's all because of this scoundrel that James was hurt like this. I had to take revenge on you." Sophia was so insane during the trial that the police had to take her to a mental hospital first. It turned out that Sophia was indeed crazy, and her mental state was very poor. Due to her mental problems, it was impossible to convict her, so she could only be treated in the mental hospital. I went to the mental hospital to visit Sophia. When she saw me, her originally dull eyes lit up. She rushed to the railing and looked at me, asking, "James, have you finally come to see me?" My memory was still of the Sophia from years ago, the graceful, beautiful, and proud Sophia. But now, she was wearing a hospital gown, her hair was casually tied up, and her clothes were covered in dust and grease. She looked much older, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say she looked like she was in her 40s or 50s. I looked into her innocent-looking eyes and asked, "Sophia, do you regret it?" Sophia didn't answer me. Instead, she asked with a smile, "James, after we get married, how about we go to the Maldives? I really want to go there for our honeymoon. By the way, do you want to see my wedding dress? It's so beautiful." With that, she stood up and twirled around, as if showing off something. I looked at the dirty hospital gown she was wearing and remained silent. Seeing that I didn't respond, Sophia pouted and said, "James, why aren't you talking? Don't you like this wedding dress? How about I change into another one? Please don't ignore me." Just as I was about to speak, the nurse interrupted me, "Mr. James, the visiting time is over." I stood up, swallowed the words I was about to say, and walked out of the ward. As the nurse accompanied me out, she told me about Sophia's recent situation. "Sophia always says she wants to go to the Maldives with you, and she also keeps saying things like 'I'm sorry, James.' I looked back and saw Sophia looking at me through the window. I could see her mouthing, "I'm sorry, James." I turned my head and didn't look at her again. When I walked out of the mental hospital, it was snowing outside. My wife came up to me with an umbrella and said, "This snow came so suddenly. Do your scars itch? We'd better get back to the car quickly, or you'll be uncomfortable again." As the snow fell on me, my scars did feel itchy and uncomfortable. These scars served as a reminder not to forgive those who had once hurt me. As for the Maldives, I would go there with my current wife.